Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode as Saul sees it. Today, because we are so close to spring break, I actually wanted to talk to everyone about travel, and I have my good friend Ed Ledford. Ed, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely, Saul. I'm looking forward to it, and
Yeah.
interested to see how you see it.
Yeah, as I see the world, it gets kind of blurry sometimes. That's why that intro goes because it goes all crazy. So, we're approaching spring break, right? And a lot of us would have normally been planning some sort of vacation time and doing some sort of excursion with our families out of state, out of the country, out of everything. How has this COVID affected someone like yourself, which mind you, you're the person that I know that's traveled the most out of everyone that I know, professional, business, family, everything else. You're the main guy for this. How has this COVID affected your travel, times?
Well, I think the right answer, Saul, is how has it affected my wife? This is the first time in our 40 years of marriage that she's seen this much of me. I mean, I have been traveling for a lot of years with my business, and then of course we had our personal travel, and with that, typically, including personal days, which there are quite a few of, and personal travel destinations, I'm spending about 125 to 150 nights a year in hotel rooms and have been doing that for years. Of course, this year, my last trip was March 7th of last year. So a year and 2 days, Anne has had to deal with me being here at home and with her. And it's been great for me. And I hope it's been reasonable for her too.
Well, I'm assuming she's left, right, a couple of times to go spend time with your grandchild, correct?
Yeah, that's happened. We've had a couple of days apart, but typically in the past, I think our record was 20 days together, and 14 of that was on a trip that we were both on together.
So,
But now I actually have made two trips over the course of the COVID that were out of state. One we drove, one we flew. They were to see our kids, quarantine before and after. So it's been really disruptive. I relate the one story. We went up, my son lives in Chicago. I'm in Indianapolis, so that's a 3-hour drive. And we went up to see he and his wife for a long weekend. And I stayed at the large Marriott, the Hotel Chicago, right downtown, which is a beautiful, large Marriott. And I was talking to the general manager about how they're doing during the COVID. And he said, well, it's been very light, but we've been able to keep the place open. I said, well, how many people are you employing now? And he said 10. Now this is a 500 room hotel. That includes housekeeping, the bartender. There was no breakfast being served. It was a kind of a to-go pack. Housekeeping, everybody, including management. So you can see it's just devastating in so many places. But I do think we're coming out of this now. I can tell you that I've got one vaccine done, and my other one will be done in a week. I am starting to schedule my back to normality travel beginning in early April. And one thing that I will tell you is I went online starting to look at some airfares for some of the locations where my customers are, and there's no bargain. There were no bargains there during early April. So I think there's going to be a sludge of people, making those spring break trips, regardless of what they say. But hopefully that's because everybody's coming out of it. We've got more and more people vaccinated, and it will be great. But it's budget is one thing I've always looked at with all that travel. You can imagine. I mean, I've literally met much of it company money, by the way, for the various companies that I work for. But I'm sure I spent well in excess of $1 million in travel and hotels and meals. After probably I'm thinking about it, it'd be a lot more than $1 million.
Yeah.
But so when I'm there, I'm very, very cost conscious and looking for the right kinds of deals. And maybe over the course of this day, we'll be able to share some of those ideas with your listeners.
Yeah, I'm excited. So you've spent that much time traveling. How many miles? And I know I'm talking air miles, have you accumulated in the lifetime of your travel? How many miles has that been, Ed? Share with us on that one.
So, and this doesn't count credit card purchases that they give you miles for or anything like that. Roughly 7 million.
7 million miles, everyone. That's a lot of zeros. That's a lot of time zones coming back and forth, back and forth. I don't know how you did it. That's just nuts.
Well, I would say the vast majority of that was done domestically too. Of course, I lived on the East Coast and went coast to coast quite a bit, but there were probably no more than a half a dozen international trips any year, and that's probably only been in the last 15 or 20 years. So that was a lot. It was a lot of airtime. I'll give you the other interesting number, and this really blew my mind. The year before last, when I got it, Marriott granted me a letter that said you have lifetime titanium status with us. And I said, what? I started to look up what that is, and it was it required that you stayed either 900 nights in Marriott hotels. And I'll grant you, I don't use Marriott exclusively. That's just one of the carriers.
One of the, yeah.
And I realized since I've lived 3 years of my life in Marriott hotels. No, just Marriott.
Just Marriott. Not including.
That doesn't count Hiltons or Hyatts.
Not including everything else. So that's a perfect leeway question that I have for you, right? Because this is a question that my wife and I always have when we travel, whether it's domestic, whether it's flying to Mexico, wherever we're going, right? We always try to find this cheapest rate when it comes to our flights. Based on how many miles you have, do you tend to stay to one airline because of the benefits that they give you? Or is it you're just trying to find the cheapest and just going to get you there and let's get there and back as quickly as possible?
That's a great question, Saul. And let me share with you, my son and his wife are avid travelers, but they don't travel for their business. They travel a couple times a year socially. They're young. Neither of them are large people. And they find the cheapest flight. They go with a backpack, even if they're going for 2 weeks overseas. That's the way they travel, and it works for them. I, on the other hand, particularly when you're doing as much travel as I am, I try to do as much as possible with one airline. Now, I will tell you, I won't pay double the fare to go on one airline versus another. But if there's a premium, $50, $80 for difference in cost, I'll always go with my airline of choice, which is generally based on where I live. So early on in my career, I lived on the East Coast in New Jersey. I was doing a lot of travel out to the West Coast. United was my carrier of choice. Now in Indianapolis, it's Delta because they have more flights everywhere than any other carrier here. And the reason I do that is a couple-fold. First and foremost, if you travel, I guarantee you're going to get disrupted. There's going to be a flight canceled. There's going to be a weather delay. There's going to be a something. And when you have any type of status with a particular airline, you definitely go to the front of the line as far as getting rebooked, getting the most convenient, et cetera, et cetera. I will tell you that I use Delta now as my airline of choice. I had a situation, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so, 2 years ago. We were coming through Minneapolis, which is a horribly laid out airport. I mean, it can take you 35 minutes to walk from one gate to another with the same airline. And it was a very tight connection, and I'm getting off the plane. They had upgraded me into a first class seat, which is one of those other advantages. And there's a guy with a sign standing by as soon as you get off the airplane. And it says Ed Ledford. And I said, well, that's me. And they said, well, come with me. And they literally walked me down the steps onto the tarmac. They had a little SUV there, and they drove me to the other gate in about 3.5 minutes, walked me up the stairs, and there I was. So you do get preferential treatment, but you have to be accumulating enough miles on that airline to get past their first tier. So to get to that second tier status, that's very, very helpful. The other thing that's important to me, I'm 6'3" and 250 plus pounds. I don't fit in
the little small seats.
Okay, so I'm at the very least, regardless of what airline I'm flying, I'm going to upgrade to economy plus, and if that costs me an extra $100, that's just the cost of me being able to get on an airplane and
the comfort
and get off it in time. So it's a comfort. But again, it's comfort versus having your knees jammed into the back of a chair for 2 hours. It's all relative. So, and that's one of the things I would share with people is whatever your trip is. Now I've got, different guidelines for myself, whether it's a business trip, business that I'm adding some pleasure to, just a trip with my wife, that we're just going away on a little vacation, or I'm going away with my golf buddies or something like that on those types of trips, or we're going as a family and we're meeting someplace. There's a different priority or order of importance to each aspect of that flight. Now, most all the time, for me, it's make sure you get at least a economy plus type seat where you have those extra few inches. But when I get to the hotels, I have my preferred hotel brands that I like to use also, for much of the same reason. I use of late I've been using Marriott, but over the years I've used different ones. And anytime I go to a Marriott, I get breakfast for myself, and if my Ann's with me, we get breakfast paid for free, regardless of how nice the hotel is. So that could be $60 a day.
Oh yeah.
So if you start looking at, if it's $25 more to stay there, well, you're getting it all back in your breakfast or what other amenities, and you might be getting an upgrade, et cetera. Now, when I'm by myself, the upgrades are of literally no importance. All I want is a comfortable bed and a clean shower, and I'm in and out, and a working TV and internet. When Ann's with me, though, I'm hoping to get a room with a view, because she really likes that, and she's not out as much as I am, obviously. But I'll go the extra for the room with the view. When I travel I got 3 children, and they're all married, and 1 grandson, and another granddaughter on the way. So we've got a family vacation planned. For a situation like that, I don't go the hotel route. I rented a house for a week. So, we'll go down to Jersey Shore. We'll rent a 5-bedroom house right, a block from the beach. And I have to, by the way, a lot of people across the country don't know much about the New Jersey Shore, but it is probably one of the finest family vacation destinations that you could go to with young kids. Between the beach, boardwalk, it's very, very comfortable. So I'd encourage you to look at something like that for family.
Well, most of us, when you talk about the Jersey Shore, we think of that MTV show, right, with the polys and the crazy hair. So, if Ed's saying go visit the Jersey Shore, go visit that. So, Ed, we've talked about travel, we talked about your stays, and we've mentioned the Marriott a couple of times. So if the Marriott sees us and wants to send us some free hotel rooms, we'd appreciate that tremendously. That'd be awesome. The one thing, let's talk about 3 tips that you have for travelers. The top 3 tips that when out of all these 7 million, it's just even saying that 7 million miles. What are the 3 tips that you can share with us? The rookie people that fly, once a quarter or once a year on these vacations. What are the 3 tips that you can share with us?
Okay, I'm going to get in trouble for the first one, Saul, because it's not going to be very popular with a lot of people. But my first tip for you is, if you're flying, take those first flights out in the morning. The ones that depart at 6 or 6:30 or 6:45. They are much, much less likely to experience delays. And that's particularly if you're connecting and have, a time you really have to get there. If you're going direct, you might be a little later because of delays. But if you've got a connection and you miss that connection, particularly nowadays as the airlines have maximized their seating capacity, they fill all the seats in a typical one once we're out of the COVID environment. Take that early flight. So that's the first one. The second one is really think through because everybody's got a budget. Some people have bigger budgets, some people have smaller budgets, but think through what's your biggest priority. Now, I told you where, airplane comfort is part of a priority for me. And I gave you a couple insights as to how I look at the lodging. But when my wife and I travel, for instance, or even the kids, our probably number one thing we like to do is experiences. Okay. And for instance, we were up in Alaska on a cruise, and the experience of the day, and that was one of the best trips I ever went on, by the way. We took a helicopter to the top of a glacier and hiked out on a glacier for probably about 3 hours. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to remember that. My wife remembers that. We have the pictures from that for the rest of our lives. That's an experience. Now, that wasn't cheap. I think it was probably $300 a head for the trip, but it was so worth it, and that's what we made a priority. And typically, we'll do that.
How often can you actually say you've been on a glacier? I saw that picture and I'm like, who can say that once in your lifetime? So it's $300. It's $300. So sorry to cut you off, but we do have one that's already taken. Cynthia's already said she's a rookie flight, a vacation person, and she's going to take the early flights. Now, Cynthia, you also have a young child, so make sure that kid gets no sleep at night, so he sleeps through the flight, just, as a parent.
There you go. Very good.
And then what's your third tip, Ed?
So the experiences is number one. And the third tip, and this applies when you're going into a city research obviously at the front end. There's so many ways to do that. The number one way, go to your local library and get the travel book for whatever that destination is. But once you do that, it's just going to tell you so much more than, you'll find online, and it'll be without all the advertising and somebody trying to suck you into something that may or may not be of value to you. But the real tip is when you go into a new city like that, one of the biggest expenses that you can consolidate or at least spend your money more wisely is on your food. I mean, if you're going away for a week, you're talking about 21 meals. Okay. If you got, yourself, your spouse, 2 kids, you're talking about paying for 84 meals in a course of a week. If it's a 2-week trip, now you're talking about 170. That can add up. So think through how you do that. One of the things we love to do when we go into a major city, and particularly in Europe or major cities in the U.S. we're not familiar with, you can go online and find a food tour. And a food tour is somebody that's local. They know the area. They're going to take you to the restaurants that people that live there would go to instead of the advertised, the hotels, the big names that you see. They're going to be, number one, much more genuine. You're going to get a lot more to the local flavor because they're all going to be locally owned, family owned generally. And you're going to have, between the places that they'll go, and they generally will take you one place for an appetizer and another place for a snack and another place for a main course, another place for dessert, etc. So you'll end up in 5, 6, 7, 8 different places on that tour. And you'll also get a list of the other local favorites. So what you'll walk away with is a list of much more reasonably priced, much more local authenticity, and a fun experience. And it's only a few bucks more, maybe $30 more than you'd spend on dinner if you just picked a restaurant and went there. So I like to do that, and I like to do that early in the trip.
Well, see, and the one thing that you look at it and say, okay, you're also in the same time that you're doing the tour, you're actually seeing the city. So you're like, oh, I want to see that, right? Instead of having to pay for a cab. Now, for Cynthia, she's saying she's writing this down. I think she's getting ready to go on a trip because she's got a travel book. Yes. She's got a food tour. Yes, she's got it. She's listening to your tips, Ed. So we're excited about that. So Cynthia, thank you for checking in on this. Now, I know I've never done a food tour, and it seems to me like you actually prepare for this. You don't do the Saul way of, traveling. Saul just wings it. He's like, today we're doing this and call it a day. The one thing I know for me, for example, as a parent, the food tour might not work because my kids' palates are still in their early, prepubescent food stages, right? Where they're like, oh, I only want eggs for breakfast. I don't want this, that type of thing. So I know as they get older, that's definitely going to come in handy for us. But I'm going to make sure that I start listening to my wife because that'll get me in trouble right now. I just said that, but I don't listen to my wife when we go on vacation. I kind of do the Saul thing and do whatever I want. And then we start figuring out stuff, so that's kind of the way it works out. Now,
just on that same point, though, I would tell you when I was young, single, and traveling, my research consisted of when I landed, and this was pre-widespread internet, I'd pick up the local paper. And one of the things I did early in my career during the baseball season is I was in whatever town it was, and the baseball team was at home. I know you're a big Padres fan. I would go to that ball game that night, and as a single, you picked up a ticket for next to nothing. Yeah, I ended up going to at the time. This was in the early '80s. At the time, I made it to every major league ballpark over the course of a couple of years, which was pretty cool. Yeah,
That's awesome. I love baseball, as everyone knows. So being able to see different ballparks, to me, it's like if I can go to a city and watch a game, I don't care if it's AAA, AA, or single A. It's exciting for me to do that. So it's always a good thing. Now, I know this. So I want to get back to this glacier experience, right? Because I recently saw this national parks thing on Netflix, as most of us have been stuck on, inside, not doing anything. I saw this. And they're saying, hey, glaciers are going away. And I forgot what this national park is up north. It's somewhere in Zion, somewhere up north, right? Were you scared that might, kind of fall apart and you fall into a hole? Because that's what freaks me out about doing that.
Well, I would tell you this. I've been on helicopter tours, probably a half a dozen of them over the years. My wife loves going up in helicopters. Okay. I'm afraid of heights. I don't even like the helicopter ride part of it. Okay. It makes me very nervous, and I'm always the big guy on the helicopter, which means you get the middle seat in the back. Okay, so you don't have the good views.
They got to balance it out, right?
Everything's balanced with the weight, but the glacier thing was just too exciting to miss. And you're very right. I mean, when you go up there, And it's a glacier. It's, it's moving at that, whatever, a quarter mile an hour a day pace that they move at. You can see running water down deep. You can see glacial holes that go down hundreds of feet. In fact, if you slipped and you went down one, you're gone. There's no coming back. I believe this was true, but at least was part of the story, is that there was a relatively new helicopter pilot that lost a helicopter up there that didn't have the proper braking and blocks in place, and started to slide, and they can't go after it, and it ended up
kind of
into a crevice. They lost. But I have to tell you, those holes are one of the most beautiful things about being up on a glacier too. Now you had heavy spiked shoes that you had on, so I didn't feel endangered at all. But I also didn't get too close to those holes. I could see them just fine from about 10 feet away. That's my thing with heights too. Basically, if I can trip and fall and not go out the window or down the hole, then I'm far enough away. I don't need to get any closer to that, even if there's 4-inch thick plate glass. I'm not going there. So
I like your style, Ed, because I'm in the same boat. We lived in Arizona for years, right? And we had never gone to the Grand Canyon as a family. So we went a couple years ago when we were visiting in Las Vegas. And my wife is trying to do all these crazy things, heights. And I'm like, look, honey, one of us has to survive. If you die, I love you, but I'm going to collect the death check, right? So then we went on the skywalk in Arizona. So you're literally walking on glass, and it's like 16-inch glass, but you can see straight down. And I'm like, right. I'm holding on to dear life, like, no, this is not going to happen. And she's like, oh, you're such a scaredy cat. I'm like, no, I'm just scared of the falling. Like, I'm not scared. I'm just scared of falling. So it was interesting.
Yeah, that's real for me.
Yeah. So Ed, one question I have for you. I know as a you travel for business, you travel for pleasure. I know we have in our industry, we get a lot of based on production, we get a lot of vacations out of this, right? A lot of great places to visit. What is that one place that you have visited on someone else's dime, whether it's a carrier or a conference or something else, that you're just like, yes, this was a destination that I would have probably never paid for, but I'm glad I came here because of X company paying for it?
I have to tell you, so there's quite a few of those. Now we've been exposed to some of the most beautiful places in the world. That's what I'd say is great about the insurance business is, it's see the world, help people. We have a grand time with that. But I guess if I had to pick just one, there was a Baltic cruise, maybe about 8-9 years ago, and I'm estimating that, put on by one of the insurance companies. And basically, we flew into Copenhagen. And then, by the way, whenever my wife and I go on these, we extend front and back since the airfare is already paid for. We'll pick a couple other hotels or destinations we want to see and include those in. But went into Copenhagen a couple of days early. We got on the cruise ship. We went through Estonia. We went over to Finland. We were in St. Petersburg, Russia, which I never thought I would ever set foot in Russia in my life, much less St. Petersburg, which is a beautiful, fascinating, historic city. And then we ended up in Stockholm, Sweden. After it was about 7 nights. So there were some stops along the way. And then we stayed a few days in Stockholm. And that's another fabulous city. So that was probably the most exciting. But there's an awful lot of close seconds, Saul. And I would give you your listeners one other tip. When you're going to big places and historic places, like if you're going to go to Rome or you're going to go to Paris or anything like that, and you're going to go on these, various days to go out and see all the historic sites, whether it's to go to the Vatican in Rome or the Colosseum or the Old City, hook up with a local guide. I mean, it's roughly, it end up costing you about $25 a head. Half of them work just for tips, but the local knowledge and they're historians, so they can tell you the significance. It will make any visit that you make just so much more valuable and entertaining, and you'll bring back so much. We used to do it. I used to, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. So I used to, bring the guidebook and read the guide. But my wife is much smarter than I, and she said, we're doing guides, and I don't talk about going on tour buses with 80 people that, it takes you an hour to do 20 minutes worth of anything. I'm talking about just small groups. They'll meet you at wherever you're going to be, and they'll tour you around and give you all the background. No difference than the food guide, but for the historic sites.
Yeah. Well, and then one thing, most people are usually scared to drive in other countries. For me personally, because we travel a lot to Mexico, I have no problem with that. But I know that taking those tour guides will take up so much time out of your day that you, instead of seeing the full tour, you're only seeing bits and pieces of what you want to see. And if you get those independent tour guides, you see it all faster and you can experience, it's a better experience all the way around. So yeah. Thank you for reminding me on that. So lastly, and this is, we're coming up to the end of this podcast. What is the one place when you went to this place and you were just like in awe? For me, it was going to Chichen Itza, in Mexico, and watching these pyramids and seeing where the hell did these rocks come from, right? You're in the middle of a rainforest and trees and everything else, all these crazy pyramids, and they are like perfectly done. That was my awe moment. What was the place that you visited where you were just like, like this is just it? Was it the glacier? Was it something else?
Well, again, this is a hard pick and 100 close seconds. But honestly, the one that had the biggest impression was one of my early overseas trips. And when I say overseas, I got to clarify that. I was very big on going to English-speaking locations. Yeah. Because I'm terrible at language. I have a very difficult time picking up local languages. I'm a whole lot better now that I have an iPhone with a translator. It's no problem.
You're like, I can go anywhere now. We're good.
I can go anywhere. And I've never been anywhere. I haven't been to Asia yet, so that's on my bucket list of places to get to. But probably one that hit me the most awe-striking was an early trip we made to Rome. And between ancient Rome with the Colosseum and all the historic sites there, and then the Vatican on another day, and then another day we went to Mount Vesuvius and oh
wow,
Pompeii. That was like, oh my God, there's a whole nother world. Most of the rest of my vacation travel and everything else had either been in the U.S., Mexico, the islands, Canada, London, Ireland. Again, the English-speaking corners. But when I got to Italy and I saw that much history, and used local guides to get around these places, I said, I got to do this. Is my new mission in travel. I want to see more of this. And so since then, I've been to Spain, I've been to Portugal, I've been to France, I've been to Switzerland, I've been to Germany, and that list still goes on. Not everywhere because there's still more to do, but I love it. I absolutely love it. So. There's so many wonderful things in this world. There's so many wonderful people.
Right. So in closing, what if I know we've covered so many different things, your 3 tips, how to, plan for your trips, the guides, eating local cuisine, saving money on that, the hotels. What's the one last thing that you can share with everyone who listens to us now or on Spotify or on YouTube later? What's the last piece of advice that you can give any would-be traveler that's looking to travel here after this pandemic is, we can start traveling again? What's the one thing?
So it's real simple, Saul. Stop and smell the roses wherever you're going. Take your time, relax. Don't try and jam everything. You got to be able to sit back and enjoy it. The reflection later, when you're looking at your pictures, you're kind of reviewing all those things, or you're reading a book that now you're interested because you learned a little bit about a particular location. Stop and smell the roses while you're out there. Life's one run through.
Well, you want to stop and smell the roses and have some wine or some tequila or some local alcohol while you're there, right? You want to enjoy that as well. So
I've got some expertise there too, but we can save that for another podcast.
We could do that. We could do the wine tasting podcast. I know we did one for Christmas, end of the year, and that was fun. So I wasn't drinking that day, but it was a good one. So Ed, I want to take this moment to thank you for sharing your tips, your travel secrets. I know there's much more information we could cover, but we try to keep these 30 minutes. And I know you have you're a couple hours ahead of me. So, it's time for you to get your dinner and enjoy some time with your wife before you're off and traveling again. But I thank you for this. Everyone, if you're interested in finding out some more tips, please feel free to reach out to me. Send me a message and I will, connect you with Ed so he can give you some ideas on different places you want to visit, because he's the person, like I said, out of everyone that I know and everyone that knows me, I know a lot of different people other than my people that I know that are celebrities, from other relationships. Ed's the person that I know that travels the most. So thank you, Ed, for being on today. We really do appreciate that. Next week, we will actually be seeing that seniors are actually getting ready to graduate from high school, start thinking about their planning for their college futures. We're going to be talking to an educator, one of my good friends, Barbara Ruggles, who is a teacher here, a local teacher, high school teacher. We're going to be discussing, what high schools are doing right, what they're doing wrong, and what parents need to be doing to get these kids better prepared for life. So tune in next Tuesday. We're always live at 5. Thank you, Ed, once again. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Saul. Safe travels, everyone.